Okay.
Okay, so some of you are familiar with the Special Ed Tech Center and some of you are new. So we were just going to quickly bring up the website and just show you our website and a few things coming up. And so as Sari scrolls down, you're going to see our fall conference is already up. Oh, we got the June book study and then the fall conference. And so we have some Chris Bouguet and we have Victoria Thompson, and then the SETC staff are doing a few sessions. So this is a virtual conference and focused on inclusive education if you're interested in planning ahead. What's our date on that, Sari? Do we have the date up front and center? You wanted to click on the conference.
September 29th for
okay, great. End of September.
And then the 30th for the actual conference. Yeah. Right.
So if you enjoy this book study and you're like, I want to get my team involved, I want to go through this next year, we're hosting the same book study in the fall. Not sure that there'll be free books, but we'll go through this series. And then we have Inclusive Learning 365, another book study going on in the fall as well. That one starts a little bit later in the fall, I believe. One other thing, which is okay, Sari, we can move back to the presentation, but there is a webinars page. And so usually Monday through Thursday, we're doing webinars on different topics around technology and UDL and inclusive ed. So that's a way for you to continue education. We have some STEM classes in there as well. So you can fulfill those clock hours also.
And they're all free.
They're all free, yes. And usually 1 hour sessions offered either at 3:30 or the noon lunch hour.
All right, so we know a little bit about who's here today. We haven't introduced ourselves yet. So Kristen, go ahead.
Thank you, Sari. I'm Kristen Leslie, the director of the Special Ed Tech Center, and my background is in assistive technology and occupational therapy.
And I'm Sari Kinsella, Sarah, but Sari's my nickname, so you might hear that from Kristen too. And I'm a speech and language pathologist and with an interest in augmentative alternative communication and work for the Special Education Technology Center. So welcome everyone, we're so glad you're here. We have go ahead.
Okay, we want to give a special thanks to a Center for Strengthening the Teaching Profession. They're the ones that said, hey, what about a book study in June? We floated some ideas. They were willing to purchase the book. So a big thank you to them for getting this going. I should just mention, if you have book questions, you can email me. We'll get my email in the chat before too long. And we'll deal with that kind of after the fact today. All right, so we just wanted to let you know the dates coming up so you can mark your calendars. 4 sessions, packing it in, but again, this book is digestible and I think we'll find it doable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have already received this information in an email, but we wanted to go over it because there's a bit to look through. Throughout the book study, these 4 weeks, we'll have a few new forms each time, but these 3 things will remain the same. We'll have our Google Classroom, we'll have a link to the folders in a Google Drive. So if you're not accessing the classroom, that's okay. And then we'll also have a book snap. And I'm gonna just go through this for a minute, do a little tour. So the handouts that you have received, you've received a link to this with a book snap, which we'll go over in a minute, and some group norms, kind of just some general book study norms, but just in general that we're actively listening. We're going to try to reflect on our own practices while also engaging and learning from others, staying on task, all those good things. Also, just because we're on Zoom, a few things, you have your video available if you'd like to have it on. We love that, and if not, we understand that as well. You are welcome to unmute anytime to comment, and we're pretty casual about this, especially in our book studies. You can use the chat, and we'll try to keep an eye on hand raising and things like that as well. We'll have some specific opportunities to collaborate and participate. If you have anything to add to this, let us know, put it in the chat. So in our handouts, we also have this called a book snap. And you may have had a chance to look at this, you might not have. We saw this idea, I can't remember where, Kristen, but and just thought it was really fun. It's a book snap is a way to kind of engage your students with something that you're reading, kind of like a book report, but just another way for engagement, right? And for them to show what they know. And so what the idea is that you make a Google slide, and this one we can all add to. So you make a slide about one of the tips in the book study, or a book that you're reading. You make a slide about a chapter or about your whole book. There's a video here that kind of talks about it. And just to know that we're not looking for exactly what's in this video. We just want you to have fun with it and make it. But if you want some instructions about how you could do it, this is kind of geared towards how to help students do this. So for instance, this is my book snap on day 13 in our book, which was talking about most of the minutes and how to engage students right as soon as they walk into the door. And it's funny because Kristen and I both chose the same one without knowing it, but my takeaways was that I've heard of, entry tasks and things like that, and but that the entry tasks should be really purposeful. I've also seen some entry tasks that just were kind of not really applying to the rest of the day or the students learning. So I thought that was a great point. And I love this idea of soft starts, where students choose how they're doing their entry task and what that looks like. And it's a chance for them to kind of just like get into the day and relax and be ready to learn. Kristen, let me see, Kristen.
Yeah, so just to illustrate this, and we'll be coming back around to this as you guys do some, but I wanted to say before I go over mine that if you're more familiar with PowerPoint, just create something in PowerPoint. It's just a visual way to represent what you got out of the tip that you chose. And so you can just send us the slide, the PowerPoint slide that you made if it's a learning curve to use Google Slides. So I chose Get Tech, and it talks about finding a partner and commit to exploring one new tech tool, maybe per quarter. If you're adventurous, maybe per month, and you're implementing that. And you could have it be general. So they gave a website, Free Technology for Teachers website. I linked that if you make this a presentation, you can click out to it. And that's just kind of general tips that a teacher shares. Or you could get really specific. You're a physical education teacher and you are learning about tech for physical education, and get into part of groups that explore that. So this is just a visual way to share what I got out of that tip.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there's my other one. I love this picture of all the balloons in the sky, thinking about us all as unique learners and getting our head in a space, getting ready to be creative and learn. And part of that can be getting our bodies ready to learn. And so there, I put a link on this Rainbow Breathe, which is a little activity for maybe more elementary kids, but I like it too, kind of getting our bodies ready to learn. So that's an example of how we'd love for you to share out tips as you explore this book.
Right. So is this a video, Kristen?
That is a video when
okay.
I think you're in present mode. Yeah.
Fun. Yeah. So you could add videos. You could do whatever you want. You can add a new slide. So here, go to slide, new slide, and then you'd add your own tip there. And we'll talk about that a little bit later as well, just when you might want to try that. And it could be a fun way to share what you've learned with others who aren't here. If you have coworkers who you wanted to talk to them about some of these tips that stood out, this could be a fun thing to share. Okay, so that's the Google Classroom folder. I have session 1 with our documents in it here today. Oops. Each time we have a session, we'll have a new folder. So everything is in here that you need and everyone can access this. We also have the Google Classroom. We just wanted to give some few different ways for people to access, and sometimes folks like to have a place like this to come to where you know everything is housed. There won't be different information on here than you already have access to. But if you look here in classwork, you have our norms, you can have the dates, the topics, the agenda, the guiding questions, which are the same, and then we'll do that for each session. Okay, back to the book study.
Okay, so we mentioned that this time around it's a little more of us talking, but we will get to sharing out with all of you too. So the first session that we're covering today in the book study is ABCs of UDL. And what that means, and what the author shared this means, is that those first 28 tips are more educator focused, teacher focused, for you to kind of have a foundation. She called it the bedrock of the rest of the tips, which are more student focused. So keep that in mind as we look at tips, that these 28 are focused on that foundation for you to understand UDL, and then the rest will be student focused. So she explained UDL in basically one page, right? So this is not the kind of book that we're diving into the framework. If you looked at the framework on the CAST website in detail, this is not the book study that does that. But she gave a great one-sentence explanation of what is UDL. Design for learning, Universal Design for Learning is a framework that inspires the development of environments and experiences that are flexible, responsive, and relevant for all students. So if this will become more meaningful to you as we look at the tips and we see, what does it mean to be flexible? What does it mean to be responsive? What does it mean to be relevant? Many of you already know this and do this, and you'll see that, oh, I do this already. So that's kind of her explanation in a nutshell. UDL has 3 principles. There's a lot to dive in around those 3 principles. I'm going to quickly explain them, and maybe we'll send you some links after for those of you who want to go further with it. But one is having multiple methods of representation. So how you present the information to the learner, how they acquire that learning, it's the what of the learning. And you guys already know that could be through listening, that could be through their reading, that could be through videos and pictures. So many different ways to access, both in a group, both individually. So that's one principle. Another one is multiple methods of action and expression. That's how they show you what they know, what they've learned, what they understand. And this choice board for a project is for older kids perhaps, but looking at ways a student could then fulfill their project, show their learning and understanding through a TED Talk, through a film, through charts, and through writing. So I was thinking of, since many of you are elementary age teachers, it'd be fun to do a quick waterfall, which is in the chat. We share out what would be multiple means of expression for elementary students for a project. What are things you do that allow them to express themselves and show you what they're learning from the content? And just go ahead and put a few words in the chat. And
before you put it in, the waterfall activity, if you've done this in your classrooms before, maybe you haven't, you have spend a minute to think of your idea and put in the chat, but don't push enter yet.
Thank you, Sari.
Yeah, and so you have it there, and then at the same time, we're all going to push enter, and it's a fun way to just get all the information, but it's also a good way for students to take a little pressure off, or maybe not get distracted by other ideas. Just it's an engagement opportunity for students as well. So think about the action expression and what you do, and then on the count of 3, we'll all push enter, and hopefully our waterfall will begin. So here we go. 1, 2, 3. Nice.
Awesome. Art, drawing pictures, comic books, screencasting, lots of drawing. Awesome. Videos. Yeah. Photographs. I love it. Lots of creative ways to express our learning.
Ooh, flipbook and podcasts, mini book videos, how fun. So we obviously have a lot to learn from each other. So this is going to be so fun when we get into our breakout rooms.
So I didn't do a separate slide on the why. The why is so important. I mean, you know, why are they learning this, and personalizing it to their interests, and them having their own personal why for being engaged in the content. So this one's vital and kind of ties into the next slide, actually kind of ties into all three of these. Students have different needs. They come from different educational backgrounds. They have different attention spans and interests. Have different language abilities, have different cultural backgrounds. So we all know we've got varied learners. We all know that here we are varied in our learning, how we learn. So this is the why for us with UDL. Okay, so implementation. Again, the author just has a short section on implementation, and what I loved about it, one of her main points, is the next slide, Sari. Assess the powerful practices you already use and then build on them. You guys already provide a lot of variety of choices in learning, both in representation and expression, and learning new ways to engage students. So think about what you do already and then build on that. Another thing she talks about is how thinking about the framework, and if you're introduced to it in a detailed way, it can be overwhelming and you have a hard time linking to practice. And that's why I'm so thankful for this book. But I think this book, for those of you who are new, if these terms are new and they sound like, oh, what does this really mean? These practical tips are going to help you with that implementation.
So we know that not everybody has received their book yet, or maybe you haven't had time to read through the tips yet, and that's fine. So that's why we talked about having a little bit more of us talking about some of these things in the beginning today. Then we'll have some time for breakout room, and then next time we'll certainly have a lot of your voice. But we did want to go over a couple tips just for those who weren't able to. So day one, the authors talk about kind of three really important tips to get started, but day one, getting the room ready. She talks about how you might divide up the spaces physically in your room. I know with, current situation, we have to be a little creative with this, with distancing and things, but we can still do it. Looking at different resources and materials. I really like that she talks about labeling the materials, and maybe even putting a picture in there, an image would be good. So students are a little bit more independent and they can find what they need. She talked about having options for grouping clusters and things like that. In the chat, Kristen will put a link to a couple articles that might help if you wanted to look further about this, getting the room ready. And one talks about how you can kind of do this in stages. Don't worry about getting it done all at once. Kind of some stages around offering learner choice and voice, and then progressing towards working with the students to do that. That's really neat. And then there's one that another article that just talks about really practical, cheap ideas for implementing UDL in your learning environments. Let's see.
Oops, a great way to think about implementation, if you back up to the room again, Sari.
Sorry.
One more, back to yours, is I bet a lot of you are already doing some of this. And so a way to springboard off of what you're already doing is to think about what might be one more sensory seating kind of option. What might be one more thing I could add next year to these options in the classroom for students to help them regulate.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this was another really important one. Day 11, include. Many of our mission statements for our districts have either the words inclusive, equitable, all students. And what does that really mean? It means UDL implementation ideas, what we're doing here. So UDL is all about supporting all students as we create lesson plans and as we teach and as we assess learning. And then schools committed to all, therefore link conversations about UDL with conversations about inclusive education. And so if this is a tip you want to dive into more, I will get that link because I think, yeah, I'll get this link to you. It should also be in the book on day 11, and it's called Is Your School Inclusive? So if that's an initiative in your school, that's in the mission statement, that website will help you look at ways in which you are and maybe are not inclusive in your schools.
Great. Another tip they talked about as we're preparing, and again, the beginning of this book is things for us as educators to do, is focus on fair, and that fair is not the same as equal, and helping our students learn that and maybe demonstrate that. They talked about with older students, maybe doing a Venn diagram and talking about fair and equal, you know, we all have the same thing, but is it fair? And that every student is unique and we should treat them that way. And they have unique needs and need unique strategies and tools. I loved that the idea for the younger students, that a Band-Aid activity she talks about, where you invite a student to role play having an injury, and they come up to the front of the room and they get a Band-Aid for their injury, maybe on their hand. And then all the other students come in up and get that same Band-Aid, but you know, they didn't have that same injury. So is that, you know, talking about that, what does that look like? And I think you could probably do some charting with that as well. But having discussions around fair and equal is a nice way to also set up your classroom for UDL. Kristen, you want to talk about just starting?
Okay, so we're going to go over one more tip and then have some time to reflect, and then time to look at a couple more tips. So just starting slow, maybe introducing one new tech tool. Maybe you're teaching, you decide to do some co-teaching and you're teaching a lesson with a neighboring teacher or a related service person, where you get that variety in that co-teaching, or a paraeducator. And that's building the skills as well of each other. And then starting slow with giving choices. And choices can cause a lot of anxiety because sometimes it's like, well, this is not a free-for-all. I really need to assess these skills and I need to see these things. But even just considering what kind of choices open up access to that lesson, open up access to that expression for the student mix in your room, and planning that ahead of time. But you can just start and start slow. Okay, so those were a few of the tips, just to, for those of you who don't have the book, to just get a feel for how quick and simple some of these tips are, and hopefully encourage you that you're already doing some of this already. So when your administrators say, we are implementing UDL, you can go, yep, I'm doing quite a bit of this. So we're going to take 5 minutes to reflect. And that, let's see. So you're going to, if you have the book, you're going to be skimming that ABC UDL section for maybe a tip that stands out to you. And for those of you who don't have the book, you're going to consider the tips that we've shared. Or you do have a document that we'll be putting up that has some of the tips in it, a few of the extra tips.
This is in your, in your handouts. Let me get there. I'm going to go through the classroom this time. List of days and tips. Section 1, tips and days. So I didn't go over this with you all, but we have the list here of all of the tips for this section. And then we've also typed out a few for those who don't have them. So it goes into more detail about a few that we've talked about. I don't know why this is scrolling so funny. Take inventory, try a makeover. So hopefully that might be helpful for those of you who need it. But we'll take.
Okay. So, Sari, did we decide a time frame for this? Are we doing?
Yes. So
2 minutes
we said 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yep, because you can jot down notes, do some reviewing. So at 12:08, we will move on to our next activity, which is reflection. This is going to be fun.
And we'll look at the chat and try to be addressing if somebody needs some support. If you're accessing the document through the Google folder, you don't have access to write in it, but hopefully you have access to see those tips.
Kristen, we have a link, the one that is for collaboration.
Okay, I'll put that one in.
Yeah, and that's when we're going to get into the next one.
Okay.
And that one you'll be able to access and edit. So right now you're just reflecting on your own. Jot your notes down on your own. If you want to put it in chat, you can, but we're really going to save the your ideas for our next activity, which is breakout sessions. So this is just kind of to get your own juices flowing. Let me get the document link and see if we can do it another way. Okay, so we still have time to reflect, but Kristen and all, it looks like our document folder was deleted somehow. That's always a risk we can take when we have so many folks in one place. So we will work on that. But don't worry, don't panic, we'll get it to you. And
so reflect on those powerful, the tips in the book, as well as you can reflect on the powerful practices you already do that you're going to springboard off of while we work on getting access to those documents by the breakout room.